Hello, Arbitrarians! Welcome to the first ever Arbitrarium BLATHERSTREAM! In these episodes, Garrett and I and other guests sit down to prattle from scratch about whatever unprovoked topic possesses us, and we follow that babbling stream until we've cashed our brains out on booze and rhetoric, and little is left but a pallid wad of whiskey-washed gray matter. And this series will be brought to you, in true blithering fashion, ad-free! That's right, normally you'd pay our premium membership to avoid likely scams from our unscrupuled but generous sponsors, but even they didn't want to attach their dubious brands to this special Arbitrarium series. Now sit back, relax, and prepare your neurons for the Arbitrarium's Peter Northian BLATHERSTREAM!
Welcome, Arbitrarians, to the first ever State of the World by the Arbitrarium.
State of the world.
Well, if
Yeah.
we're gonna do a musical accompaniment, we
Oh no!
Yep.
Shit.
All right. So, we've been looking around the world, and we've noticed that, well, it exists, and there's a lot going on in it. Some of it's good, most of it's bad. We wanted to talk about it more in a general sense. But first, how are you? You're a great person if you're listening to this. Only the best people listen to the Arbitrarium. Our audience, finest in the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I know our audience. They need it stated.
We know our audience because we are our audience. Okay, so this is the first totally free-form episode of the Arbitrarium. We don't even know if this is going to be an a la carte or a full episode yet. I guess we'll find out.
The biggest thing in my brain, as far as what's going on in the world, is Ukraine. Some of the news that's been coming out of that, and people are freaking out, as they have been since this whole thing started. This latest, oh my god, the world's about to end thing comes from NATO sending Western-style tanks to Ukraine.
Western-style tanks?
Okay, Western tanks.
Okay.
I mean, there is kind of a style to Eastern tanks. They're very low to the ground, kind of dome-shaped turrets.
Well, where are these tanks coming from specifically?
The United States, Germany, Great Britain.
Okay, so yeah, all over the West.
If it's got a 120 millimeter smoothbore gun, it's being sent. And the reason that people are freaking out about this is the primary anti-tank killing shell fired from NATO armies is a 120 millimeter sabot round, which is a subcaliber munition, meaning it fires a bullet that's smaller than the bore. And it has sabot means shoe. It's got a shoe around it, so it fits in the barrel. And then when the bullet leaves the barrel, that shoe just splits off. Well, these sabots are made of depleted uranium.
Oh.
Yeah, they're very effective at getting through armor. But the Russians are saying, if we see sabots being used against our tanks, well, that's a radiological weapon, and we're going to call that a nuclear weapon, and you're going to say, well, you used nukes on us first, so we can use nukes now.
Okay, except that's not... Sorry, Russia, nobody cares. That's not a thing.
You're not going to use nukes. Mm-hmm. I will be supremely surprised if Russia uses nukes.
Yeah. I didn't even heard about that. I mean, I've had my head buried in other work, but usually something that severe I'll at least hear about.
Well, every month, Russia's been saying, we'll go nuclear. Mm-hmm. Every month they've been saying that, and it hasn't gone nuclear. NATO keeps crossing the line. NATO keeps crossing that line that Russia draws in the sand about, you're not going to send this to Ukraine, and then we send it to Ukraine. Okay, well, you're not gonna send this to Ukraine, and then we send that to Ukraine. So, yeah, I don't. All that Russia has that could threaten NATO is their nuclear arsenal, and they're not going to use it. Mm-hmm. It would be supremely stupid to use that.
Yeah, because we were talking about not that long ago. The fear of them using it at first, and then for me it was I can't imagine a situation other than outright tyrant madness, Mad King kind of stuff from Putin. Other than that, I can't see any reason they would ever do that because of the consequences of it. It's just the consequences of something like that would be awful for everyone. To the point that unless you are literally just going total on full tilt Mad King, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, over over just eastern Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening.
No.
So yeah, and kind of piggybacking off that same subject or same general subject, different facet. I've made no secret on this program that I tend to lean more right. I'm not going to call myself conservative because I reject the liberal conservative dynamic.
That's funny because I actually like the liberal conservative dynamic a lot more than the right left dynamic.
Well,
those words mean more.
Well, excuse me, conservative progressive dynamic. I'm rejecting that because it's like your progressives are being driven by are trying to move towards an ideology that is like 200 years old. That's where they're socialism, communism. That's where they're trying to go, right?
Well, yeah. There's a lot to it that's also equally as old. Ironic, some of it seemingly biblical, but yeah, no, they're moving backwards.
Yeah, I'm
and
not going to
people
call
are really
myself
starting to see
conservative because I'd like to try something that's never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
But that's getting into more my personal political beliefs. But the people who tend to share more of my political beliefs are very opposed to sending aid to Ukraine, which I don't understand.
I mean, is it just like compulsive isolationist kind of mentality? Because
maybe
conservatives tend toward that, it seems. At least modern-day conservatives.
Maybe. I personally think it's more along the lines of, well, this happened under Democrat leadership, so we have to oppose what the what the power and party wants to do. I think that's more it. And then the reasons that are being given is, well, Ukraine's corrupt. It's okay. Ukraine doesn't have to be the good guy for Russia to be the bad guy.
Right.
And
I mean, it's a lesser... at the very least, you could make a pretty convincing argument that it's the lesser of two evils if you're going to go that direction.
Right. And another thing that's on my side of the political spectrum tends to be, well, we need to support people who are doing the right thing. Ignore anything else. If you find someone who's doing the right thing, you need to support them. Mm-hmm. Is there a more right thing than defending your homeland when invaded?
I mean, is that like a hyper general question? Because I'm sure there probably are things that are more right, but again,
well, yeah,
that's a really awkwardly clunky subjective question.
Picking up a rifle and defending your homeland is objectively the correct thing to do.
You can't say objectively.
I'm going to say objectively.
Good luck. Can you make extremely strong arguments for it? Yes, but objective to me means unquestionable once you get down to the logic of it.
And that's why it's susceptible to postmodernism.
You just can't do that with questions of morality.
Okay. But these people are doing what anyone on the right says you should do if you're invaded. But we don't want to send money to them because it's going to a corrupt government. I thought it was support the people regardless of the government.
Well, it comes down to this thing that just happens, and we see it even more and more now than... I mean, we're relatively young, so maybe it's always happened, but seems to be that it's happened more now, where most people they're not really critically evaluating the situation in general. They're just kind of... because they have lives to live. They've associated themselves with certain groups, and they'll have their own ideas, but they usually won't make waves, and they'll wait for somebody who is at least perceived to be in some kind of leadership position within that group to tell them it's okay to think a certain way, or that they're going to follow, they're going to go down a certain path, socio-politically or philosophically or whatever it happens to be. And what I find interesting about that is, what I see happen a lot is that, and now to be fair, I see this more on the left than I do on the right at the moment, where the conservatives over the last almost 8 years or so, maybe even longer, have pointed out the problems of things like critical race theory and affirmative action and those types of things. And And race swapping, we're seeing more of that now. Again,
It's more in culture than policy.
right. But these types of things are things that people on the conservative end have been criticizing for a long time, and most often they would just be sort of waved off, or even aggressively waved off as, racists or bigots or any of that kind of stuff. And now you're starting to see people on the left making these arguments as if they've never been made before. And now that somebody on the left in some perceived leadership position is starting to introduce these ideas, now people on the left, on those lower rungs, the average person who considers themselves on the left, will start using them as talking points as if the left came up with them, as if the arguments have never been made. And that's frustrating.
Yes, it is.
It's like, guys, seriously, look back at, I hate to even say this, but even look back at Fox News in like 2006, 2007. You were seeing this.
When we graduated.
Yes, when we graduated. You were seeing this stuff from them at that time. Now, I am loath to defend Fox News because of what it's become, and it has become a Mickey Mouse parody of itself. It's embarrassing. It is absolutely embarrassing. But yeah, I was actually talking about that with somebody today. That I was talking to you a little bit about it earlier. How the pendulum is starting to creak back toward the middle, at least, and I'm hoping it stays there. But it probably won't.
Oh no, it's going to get far worse on the other side.
Yeah, well, and because people are starting to push back on a lot of these ideas, like critical race theory, and even on the smaller, I would say race swapping is on a much smaller scale. That's a cultural entertainment type thing.
Yeah, you got to separate policy and culture.
Right. But you're starting to really see that pushback, and the problem is that, and this seems to happen so much over history that it's amazing to me that people, even in the intellectual circuit, are subject to it. Now, I used to lump Ben Shapiro in with those people, and I just can't do that anymore. I'm not saying he's a stupid guy, because he's not stupid, but he has made it very clear how susceptible he is to popularity and reputation and those kinds of things. He's built this whole Daily Wire thing up to be pretty damn successful, but along the way, the more, like, if you watch his progression sort of as a personality, he's become sort of a cartoon version of himself. He's become a cartoon version, like a mascot of conservative intellectualism, and it's really, really difficult to watch sometimes.
For me, one of the reasons why it's really frustrating to watch is he's held up as he has become the mascot of conservative thought, and yet you hear what he'd like to propose, and it's like this is like milquetoast republicanism, and like big R Republican Party.
Yeah, well, he's always been like that.
Well, that's not conservative so much as it is just slow down, Democrats. What are you actually? You're just trying to slow things down, not actually conserve much. That's why it frustrates me.
What are some examples of some of the things you've heard him talk about?
All right, this is going to make me sound like a bigot, but that was going to come anyway, I guess. The only two things that I've really heard him hold fast to is a better way to frame this is Second Amendment, but let's just keep it how it is. Let's not try and repeal anything. Let's not have any new gun laws. Just keep things the way they are and enforce the gun laws we have. Not, hey, how about we get rid of some of this useless shit that isn't enforced in the first place? Like NFA items. Suppressors, short-barrel shotguns, short-barreled rifles, machine guns.
Oh, no, that face was because I'm waiting to hear the part that makes you sound like a bigot. That just sounds like gun stuff. Normal gun stuff.
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
The other thing that he's held fast on is opposition to abortion.
Okay.
Again, just hold things as they are. So let's not rock the boat. Occasionally he'll say something along the lines of, I think this is absolutely wrong. But never repeal all allowances for abortion. I've never heard him say anything along those lines.
I mean, you wouldn't get very far with a suggestion like that, I wouldn't think.
I mean...
Even if that was your end goal, you're not going to get far by just coming out and saying, ban abortion.
That's how the left got to where they are. Saying the crazy shit out loud and they said it loud enough and long enough that it became acceptable. Mm. That's not a question of morals, that's a question of tactics. Mm.
So, it seems like what you're saying is that...
Where's the ban gay marriage?
That Ben Shapiro has not gone too far enough.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
It seems to be more about strategy than it is about principle. And that's
that doesn't surprise me at all out of Ben Shapiro.
That is the thing that I hate about the Republican Party.
Well, I think it's important to have that sort of strategy. I mean, I don't think that you should lie by omission. So there's that. You know, whatever you stand for, tell people. If you're in a position like that. But it's also true that you're not. I really don't think you're going to get very far in this situation the country's in right now by saying ban gay marriage, ban abortion. I just don't. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe that would empower a whole bunch of conservatives to, and I'm going to say hyper-conservatives, because when you're talking about a full ban on abortion and a full ban on gay marriage, that's, to me, when I use the term right, that is much more politically charged than conservative. When I think right, I think, like gun-toting, the caricature of those types of people,
No, keep going. I want to see if you describe me.
I'm picturing, the caricature that they generally draw of people who are on the far right, probably a MAGA wearing, gun-toting, half-wit redneck, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. The stuff that's not fair, but that we have met people like,
Yes. Have family members who are like that.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I think of when I think of the word right.
Well, funnily enough, most of those that are like that can't actually shoot that well.
But when I think of conservative, I think more somebody who's at least for lack of better words. They're wearing a suit. Not necessarily a suit, but, average intelligence, who actually does take the time to think about what it is that they believe, at least to some degree. I'm not going to say that they're an intellectual as we usually think of them. When I think of conservative intellectuals, I usually think of somebody like, Peterson didn't used to be in that camp.
No, he didn't.
But he's definitely gone more into that camp.
No, that's another thing about the conservative movement that drives me nuts. It's tactics, not so much principle. A lot of your big conservative or I'm not even going to say thinkers, but conservative personalities are people who used to be on the left.
Yeah.
They left the left, and now they're becoming the nucleus of the new right. Because
you're dealing with a lot of disenfranchised and disillusioned liberals.
Yeah, but they're still coming from that same mindset that spawned the left as we know it. And that's why you have the Republicans. They're just slow down, hold on, instead of no, let's reverse some of this dumb shit that we've done.
Well, I don't think it's stupid to have a strategic, like, we need to do this. We need to have a reasonable strategy for getting this done. And if you're going to win enough people over that you can get anything done, the idea is, we're going to have to take it at least somewhat slowly. We need to actually convince people instead of demand it. I think that's a reasonable way to go about it. I think it's the smartest way to go about it. Otherwise, you end up continuously feeding into that us versus them rhetoric, that mentality, and it just keeps going back and forth. That's what keeps that fucking pendulum swinging back and forth.
That pendulum is always going to swing.
It doesn't have to swing as far as it has lately.
It's been swinging since the first caveman picked up a rock and brained the other one over a difference of opinion.
It doesn't have to swing that violently, not to the degree that it has over the last, I would say at least since 2008, but honestly probably since 9/11 roughly. I think that's a fairly decent marker of when that really started to swing hard. Somewhere around there.
So I mean, we can keep going back on that. What direction did it swing in 9/11 or after 9/11? Where was it before 9/11?
Before 9/11, it seemed like it was still relatively balanced. I mean, now to be fair, we do have 50-50 liberals and conservatives in the U.S. right now, roughly. That seems to be, based on voting habits, that seems to be, in voting statistics, that actually seems to be true. But they've become more polarized, both of those. Mm-hmm. But back then, they weren't as polarized. Now, there have been other times in history where we've gotten pretty polarized, but it hasn't always been like that. And to try and keep that, the idea, hopefully, is to keep from becoming that polarized as often as possible. But
there's part of me that actually says, thank God for porn.
But with...
And I'll explain that if you want.
I'm trying not to lose my train of thought, but it might have already happened. I might have been cursed.
You thought about boobies.
No, that's not. Well, that's not actually what happened. But the bringing up of porn did derail me.
Sorry.
So I was talking about the pendulum swinging back and forth, the polarization, and all that stuff, and what was. I'm trying to walk myself back to what the hell I was talking about when I started this line of thinking. Yeah, it didn't seem like it was that bad until, I'll say 2008, but honestly, I remember feeling like it was kind of starting during the Bush administration. And then I did really hit with Obama. I do remember that. It started getting pretty polarized then. And then Trump was like, you thought it couldn't get much worse under Obama, and then we had Trump, and everything just went to complete and utter shit. But the idea of having a strategy to try and get us back toward the middle somewhere without demonizing everyone and actually taking the time to convince people of whatever your argument is, that's good. You don't win people over any long period of time by polarizing them against another group. It just doesn't work that way.
No, you don't need to you don't need to say, okay, these guys are terrible and we're not. You can say, no, this is what I stand for, this is why it's a good idea, and this is why I'm going to push as hard as I can for it.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe that's a sign of the times that I just immediately assumed that it involved demonizing or rat fucking out the other group.
Some of the bills that have been pushed by the latest class of congressmen, mm-hmm. I'm like, my God, they're speaking my language now. One that was disband the ATF.
Yeah.
Another one, we're going to remove short-barreled rifles completely from the NFA. Mm-hmm. And I know I center on the firearms things, but that's what I follow.
Right.
I'm not exactly a single-issue voter, but there's one that I definitely pay attention to more than the others. Mm-hmm. And that's firearms policy.
Right.
But they're actually saying these things. Mm-hmm. They're putting these bills forward. They're not saying these people are evil because they want to take your guns. It's no.
Shapiro is. Well, not on the gun issue, but with like everything else, this whole campaign of we won by non-compliance and the other side are fucking pricks and assholes.
No, like, I'm not going to comply because I don't think I should have to.
Right.
Not because I think that Democrats are evil.
Well, what I'm saying is the Shapiro camp is really maybe that's what bothers me about Daily Wire now is that it's the commercials I'm seeing are so unbelievably like propagandist. It feels to me like really cheap propaganda, and I don't like being spoken to that way. I don't like the cartoonish feeling of it. It really is a caricature of that kind of shit. It drives me nuts. But I think the reason we're seeing that, and I actually don't have a problem with this necessarily, is that, like you said, we're seeing we're seeing disillusioned and disenfranchised people who call themselves liberal, maybe not left anymore, and certainly not progressive. But they moved toward the center, and then at least the talking heads for those groups, they started to push more toward conservatism. And I'm talking about people like Jordan Peterson to an extent, but Dave Rubin, like all the IDW guys, Dave Rubin,
and I don't
Brett Weinstein.
I don't think that's so much that they've been attracted to conservatism so much as
repelled by progressivism.
The left has gone so far.
Yeah.
Because if you were to talk to Dave Rubin, for instance, about his opinions now versus his opinions in 2010, I don't think they would have changed that much.
I actually don't think I think they would have changed in some ways significantly, but I think he he pushes more. For a while, he pushed a lot more to the right, and then he's sort of backed up back to. It seems like back around where he was when I first started listening to him. Yeah, he was on the Young Turks. And that's what drove him away, because he started seeing the bullshit that was going on and the things that they were telling him that they could and couldn't say, and what they, like, all that stuff. It drove him nuts, and that's why he left. But you're seeing that same thing with a lot of these people that are becoming voices for the conservative. And I'm not going to say the right, because I don't think they would agree with that. I think conservative at best, but many of them, including Dave Rubin, consider themselves classical liberals. But you've got Rubin, Peterson. I'm not going to put Shapiro in there because he was never, ever, as far as I know, on the left.
Tim Pool.
Let's see. Who's that other guy? Oh, well, Thomas Sowell. You could count Thomas Sowell, technically.
Yeah,
because he was a Marxist.
That happened in the 60s, man. Everyone was a Marxist.
It was actually even longer ago than that, but yeah. Yeah, he was a Marxist. And
he was a Marxist when he was in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Which is...
He was a Marxist until after he got his PhD in economics. But yeah, and you got Sowell, you got a few of the people in Brett Weinstein's camp. He's had, I'm trying to think of some other examples. I want to say John McWhorter might have been one of them, but I can't remember the details of his history. Yeah, it's wild. There's a new voice.
You removed the last 3 letters of that guy's name, and you've got a new item at McDonald's.
The McWhore.
This was a McProstitute soliciting McSex in the McDrive-thru.
There's got to be a subject as female carrying a McRib joke there somewhere. But there was another thing I was going to mention there. But now I'm spacing on it. Oh, there's a new voice, young black lady. I can't remember her name. She's got a name that's difficult to pronounce, to be honest. But she's very young, and she's got a show on with oh crap,
The Blaze.
Not The Blaze. The educational institution ran by what's his face. Boy, my memory recalls garbage right now.
Is he Jewish?
Yeah, no.
I was going to say
Christian.
PragerU.
It is PragerU, yeah.
Okay, yeah, Prager, that's not an actual education institution, but...
No, he has one. As far as I know. I feel like I remember him talking about... Well, not him, but somebody who was involved
Dennis Prager?
About that. Yeah.
That's more of a...
Maybe it was... Okay, maybe I'm getting some things mixed up, because I know they were talking about... and I think Prager was part of it. A number of the guys and ladies in that group of people we're talking about creating a online university.
Mm-hmm.
To, for lack of better words, combat what the perceived sort of progressive propaganda that they're seeing, in many cases mandated in public schools and things like that.
PragerU typically, they don't have any, like, personalities that stick with them. It's more like, hey, this is something I want to talk about, so I'm going to talk about it on PragerU.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically TED Talks, except for conservatives.
Yes.
But no, they have a new lady. I can't remember her name, but she was her mother is, as far as I know, still pretty far left, progressive and all that stuff. And she grew up like that and was disillusioned by it. She at a certain point started to notice how miserable she was because she had been taught to hate people she didn't really know. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so she ended up on the other side. Yeah, so those are the kinds of people that seem to be pushing their way into certainly media leadership and maybe even eventually political leadership on the more conservative or even centrist end of things. And I think a lot of that can be, I think we can probably thank Joe Rogan to probably a fairly large degree for making those voices widely heard. Because Rogan's podcast is the one that featured all these people and made them more mainstream. Peterson's the only one you could probably make an argument didn't necessarily go that way, and Shapiro probably as well. But all the other ones got heard primarily through Rogan's podcast. But like I said, I don't necessarily...
Sargon, that's another one.
Sargon, yeah.
He came from the left.
Yeah.
Carl Benjamin.
Well, and this is something that, and actually this is something I talk about with my students when we're talking about character development, because I use the liberal conservative political spectrum to kind of describe this, because it's the easiest way to think about it. And it's like, look, you've got this spectrum of people who just have fundamental moral differences. And you can make pretty reasonable arguments in a certain spectrum, from liberal to conservative, right? And we talk about how they balance each other from time to time and those kinds of things. But then you have the people who are beyond the edges of those, out at the fringe, the more,
like me.
You'll call them extremists.
Like me.
Or fundamentalists, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, there we go. I'll accept that.
But I don't put you in this camp, and here's why. Because the way I talk about it with them is, look, you can be anywhere in that spectrum and be a pretty normal, well-meaning human being who even has some has good reasons for thinking the way that you do. But what determines, I think what classifies the line, or what determines or dictates the line of going out to that far and then crossing that line into fundamentalism or extremism, I think, is when you move from I want you to understand me to I want your acquiescence regardless of what you think.
Okay, that's fair.
To me, that is, and I talk about this with my students, because when you're developing characters, this is a good way to determine whether or not your character is just, maybe even relatively far out there, but has good reasons and all that, and even has good intentions. To, okay, once you start trying to force people to believe what you believe, through violence or violence or
intimidation, coercion,
or even law,
which
to a certain extent.
Violence and intimidation, and coercion. That's what law is.
And once you get to that point, then we're dealing with somebody who is, I would say, an ideologue.
Ideologically possessed.
Who is, ideologically possessed. And what I mentioned to them, and this is the important thing, is whether or not you are an extremist or a fundamentalist or whatever you want to call it, has nothing to do with whether or not you're liberal or conservative or progressive or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. Because you can have reasonable people on both ends of that spectrum. What seems to be what determines whether or not you're out on those fringes is your personality. And that's really all it is. Because if you had someone who was just a violent, narcissistic asshole, depending on their environment, they could have been on the far left or the far right, because you can accomplish the same things for the same reasons on both ends of that.
And you're kind of going to horseshoe theory, or the horseshoe hypothesis.
Yeah, explain that.
Where the fringes have more in common with each other than the center.
Yeah. Yeah, because they want acquiescence. It's not really about whatever the truth is at that point. It's about them requiring validation. And I can't think of a better word than acquiescence, because that's really what that is. They require you and demand that you live by the rules that they believe should govern life. And there's no wiggle room there. It's sheer tyranny. Order to the extreme on both ends. And that's the way I generally explain it. I'm gonna have to edit that. I forgot to turn my phone down.
Crap.
Hold, please. Okay, roughly around the 33-minute mark, I gotta remember that the phone rang.
You never edit these things.
Actually, I do. To be fair, I actually edit the beginning of it pretty much every episode just to close any silent gaps.
Okay.
So that we have a good momentum going into it.
All right. I do like momentum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
So, yeah, I want to go into the porn thing.
Okay.
And so I personally think porn is not a good thing. I think this is a cultural vice that needs to be limited far more than actually exists. It's a rather caustic substance culturally.
Yeah.
And we can see what happens. Or we can look at the state of dating right now and Not directly, but there are indirect correlations there that are alarming, to say the least.
You've been watching a fair amount of Peterson lately? Because he's been talking a lot about that.
No, actually.
Okay.
This is not Peterson.
Talking a lot about that, and...
This actually comes from Louise Perry's The Case Against the Sexual Revolution.
Okay.
Partly.
Same talking points, even.
And, yeah, Mrs. Perry really... she's persuasive.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote it primarily for women, so what does that say about my mindset? But it really distorts how particularly young men view women when they have a porn addiction, and it's extremely addictive.
Yeah.
And it's free, and it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you this, Dave. What demographic has launched the most, like pretty much all of, and the most violent revolutions in human history?
What demographic?
Yes.
I'm not sure what you're getting at. So.
Young, restless, unmarried men.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
I didn't know about the whole unmarried thing, but young, restless men, yeah, I could believe that easily.
Typically unmarried.
Oh.
The frustration of denial of sex is palpable.
Yeah.
To most young men.
Yeah.
So, hell,
just real quick. Mm-hmm. We should probably preface this. Well, I don't know what your answer to this is, but I want to know. Are we dipping into apologizing for incels here? Are we getting into that territory?
No.
Okay, good.
No, I'm not.
Good.
No, I'm not apologizing for incels. It's more like, get your fucking act together. Get out there.
Yeah. Bucko.
Mm-hmm. Am I quoting Peterson without knowing it? Is that what's going
yeah.
on? Okay,
yeah.
Well, fuck.
Oh, yeah.
If look at pre-internet, porn was actually pretty hard to get a hold of. It was fairly rare.
Well, I think pre-internet, most of it was, smut magazines. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, the actual video stuff, I mean, you kind of had to wait till your parents were out of state.
Yeah. Yeah,
and God help you if they found it.
It was magazines that you likely inherited from your dad, which is weird to me.
Stole,
yeah. I'm still going to say inherited because that's kind of what happens, really.
Okay, that's fair. Now you don't have to hide anything because it's already easily hidden in the series of tubes that is the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Just pop on incognito mode. There you go. So if you look at the average marriage rate right now and compare it to any other time in human history, we are well past due for a revolution. You start to have serious, and I mean serious, civil unrest right around when the average age of marriage is around 24, 25.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good God, we're probably in the 30s.
We're 27, 28.
Okay.
And I think porn's to thank for that. For the lack of violence we've seen. Yes.
I feel like it's a multivariate issue. I don't think you can lay that down.
I'm not saying that it's entirely, porn's.
I don't even feel like it's mostly porn's
fault. This is kind of... Thank you for not sending us into a violent revolution.
Oh.
Is what I'm saying here.
You're thanking porn for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because what...
But you also think it needs to be restricted?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's... Like I said, this is a more complicated thing than most of my opinions, really. If we didn't have it around, we'd probably have had a violent revolution, say, 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think COVID would have done it.
So 3 years ago?
Yeah, if not 5 years ago.
It's weird to think that the start of COVID was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
well,
nuts.
It also lasted for at least 2 years.
I don't know, it kind of went out the window once Ukraine got invaded.
Yeah. Yeah, we all stopped giving a shit, thankfully.
Yeah. But what's going to be easier for someone to just okay, I'm going to actually have to get off my ass and go protest or pick up a rifle and shoot someone, or I could just sit here and crank it to some of the hottest women in the world.
And also just vent my frustration about the other stuff on the internet.
Yeah.
Instead of actually having to do anything. Which, that's, that happens in that realm too, but it also happens with, you're bleeding.
Yeah, it happens.
But it also happens with, and I noticed this a lot, especially during COVID and BLM and all that stuff, where it was like, boy, if you were on the internet, you would think that every liberal you knew was out in the streets. Mm-hmm. And I really took a close look at that. And it was like, no, I'd say about 10% maybe of the left-leaning people I knew were actually out during the protests.
Remember, this is also Indianapolis. Right.
Well, I'm talking about the people I know on the internet wide. So this is not just Indianapolis people. And I think I told you one time one of the people I remember in specific was really talking up all this revolution, support the black population, and like you would have thought he was out there, with a gun protesting all this stuff, ready to just fuck shit up.
You saw what happened to the guy in Austin.
And then I saw him. One of his friends said, "Hey, I'm going out to the protest downtown tonight. You want to come? I know you've been really blah blah blah." And he was like, "No, man, I can't. My social anxiety is way too high, but I'm right behind you." I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah.
You joke of a human being. Hell, I was actually thinking about going down.
Oh, the podcast The Lotus Eaters did a fun little social experiment. Mm-hmm. They posted a question on Twitter, which was, if you were an American communist, do you own a gun? And if not, why not? And most of the American communists said, no, I don't own a gun. And a lot of the answers were basically because they're scary.
Mm-hmm. See, that's something you can look forward to with modern communists. They're too afraid to own guns, so they're not really that scary. Right.
Whatever happened to under no pretext?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah. And going off the porn thing, like, I am so glad I'm not dating. That looks awful. I think the modern dating market is the worst it's ever been.
It's getting better. In my experience, it's getting better because I am still single and I am still looking. Mm-hmm. And I feel more comfortable now than I did even last year. Because I think people are just calming the fuck down out of compulsion because they're tired of being miserable all the time.
Well, that's good.
I think that's why we've seen a cool down in the tensions between the left and the right too. And when I go out, because I go out even on my own pretty often and just talk to random people all the time. I love doing that. And my experience has been, I'll talk to people who identify as liberal or even progressive. And they're complaining about shit that we were complaining about on the center for years. With the same talking points, the same arguing points. They're tired of
I've never been in the center.
They're tired of the contention. They're tired of fighting about. They're tired of fighting about everything. I mean, they're looking at things through a more reasonable lens than they used to, because it burned really hot too fast. And I remember talking with you and Carolyn about this, and I was saying something like, I don't think it can last. It's unsustainable. People are going to get tired of this, and we're just naturally going to float back to at least a general desire to be somewhat respectful toward each other. Just for peace of mind, for God's sake. And that seems to be where we're going. So.
Well, I hope that's where we're going.
That's, for me anyway, that's been the real feel out in public.
But that's the dating market. That's affecting the dating market?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it is.
I mean, the stats don't bear that out. If you were to make...
well, this is literally within the last year or two, so we're not going to see stats on it, really.
Oh, no, this is a statistic from 2 years ago.
Well, I know, but all I'm saying is it's going to take time for that to catch up.
Right. If Tinder were a country and you were to apply it to the... it's not FICO score. It's... There's a measure in macroeconomics of inequality of a nation. Mm. And it's scored between 1 and 0.
Yeah, that's not FICO.
Where one person has all the wealth in the entire country. 0, everyone has a perfectly equal distribution of the wealth.
I thought you said it was between 1 and 10.
No, it's from between 1 and 0.
Okay. Not sure why they chose that, but
Well,
all right.
0, 1. If Tinder were a nation and sex was the wealth, Tinder would be the second most unequal country in the world. Beat only by South Africa. Venezuela is less unequal than Tinder.
The Pornrito distribution.
Yes. Well, this is just, it's not necessarily porn, but sex.
Well, yeah. But it is a Pareto distribution of sex. I mean, if you're saying...
Where 0.01% gets 90% of the sex?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
that's what the Pareto distribution is. It's a small group of people end up getting most of the resources of some kind.
All right.
Yeah, it's sort of a natural occurrence in almost every field that as far as I know, almost every field we've studied the Pareto distribution on. When it comes to resources, including money and all that kind of stuff, that's what happens. Even in entertainment, it's a very small group of people create most of the content. Comparatively small group of people. A comparatively small group of musicians get signed, make music, win awards. I mean, it's a tiny percentage.
How long does that have to take to manifest?
From like nothing? Hell, I don't know.
From
I mean, you'd have to be able to track it back to the start of an entire industry if we were talking about music, you know.
Well, we can track that for dating apps.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And it wasn't too long ago, like 10 years ago, where, oh, you met on a dating app? That's friggin' weird.
Mm-hmm. Unsafe.
Yeah, it was unsafe. Are you crazy? You're putting your personal information on the net? Mm-hmm. Because they call it the net?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And now, most people meet via dating apps. Not through friends, not through social network, or not through traditional social networks.
Yeah.
It's through dating apps, which are some of the most toxic places on the planet.
Having been on a few of them, yeah, I can see that.
I mean, everything you are is boiled down to an attractiveness number.
On
Pumped into
Tinder,
an algorithm.
Yeah, well, see, it's funny. Some of them really try to avoid that, but you still have to have pictures.
Yeah, it still happens.
There's no dating site I've ever seen that isn't that doesn't feature the picture immediately first and as the primary thing. I mean, they all have sections for personality questions, preferences, all that kind of stuff. They all. Have
You like
those.
dags?
What? Dags? You like dags? Oh, you mean dogs?
Keravan. Pero ik blue.
Sorry, man. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about porn and the negative effects on society and marriage and all that stuff.
And then transitioning to the dating thing and how I'm so glad I'm not in that market. That sounds like a personal hell.
Well, look, I think a lot of it, at least for a few years prior to this, like I said, it seems like it's gotten better over the last year, but a lot of it was you had the Me Too movement didn't help. And because what you ended up with were a lot of guys that became afraid, and I can understand this, became afraid to approach women.
Yeah, when you've seen like a 17-year-old kid get arrested for approaching a woman and like putting his hand on her shoulder.
Yeah.
After he read in a book that, hey, that might help put her at ease.
Yeah, yeah.
He's following the advice of a professional dating coach, and he goes to jail.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's like, you ever toot that fucking flute again?
I'm gonna toot this flute.
But yeah, and I remember talking to a lot of guys about that. And these were normal well-meaning guys that meant well enough, but weren't maybe particularly attractive, and that's really what it boils down to. And even women acknowledge this. It's like, if you're attractive, you can get away with a lot of the shit that you would, maybe get a 17-year-old arrested for if she didn't find you attractive. That hand on the shoulder is either romantic or creepy.
In any professional setting, I actively try to avoid working with women. I really do.
I don't.
Because of that kind of thing.
I don't care.
I do. I have a lot of people that depend on me. If I get fired over something stupid like that, just the allegation ruins my life. I don't. No, I'll
call me naive, but
I'll be Mike Pence on that one. I'm not going to drinks or dinner to anyone who isn't my wife alone.
Yeah, I don't care about that either. Call me naive. Well, I mean, just call me naive. But I to me, it's like, I don't think I'm a son of a bitch. I don't think I'm creepy, and I have never had a problem like putting a hand on a girl's shoulder to say I want to walk past, or to say excuse me, or any of those things. And I've had times where girls have complained of, not creepiness, that's going too far, but maybe being uncomfortable with it, and I was like, all right, well, sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, and then I'll go on with my life. It doesn't bother me to have those types of run-ins with girls, because to me it's like, look, I know what I felt and what I meant in that moment, and it was nothing nefarious, so you're on your own if you're going to try and push that. I don't know. It just doesn't bother me. I don't pay any mind to it.
You sweet summer child.
Maybe there'll be a time where I end up getting in trouble and going to jail. Because
maybe you end up me too. Especially since you want to go to Hollywood.
Well,
And you're a conservative. Going to Hollywood.
I'm not sure if I'm a conservative or not. I'm certainly not progressive. That is for damn sure. But I think I probably fall pretty reasonably in the classical liberal camp. I feel that's a pretty comfortable place for me. Because as an example, when we're talking about things like porn, to me it's like, I actually agree with all of those types of arguments, that it's been an absolute detriment to have a prevalence of free internet porn. It has been an absolute detriment to society, to Western society at the very least, but probably global society. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want to restrict people from being able to make it if they consent to make it.
See, I don't think consent is the. I think consent is a necessary but insufficient condition for something to be moral. And even then, I'm even questioning on the consent aspect of it. I think a lot of modern morality is based off this idea of consent, and I think that's the wrong way to go about this. I think that can cause quite a bit more harm. Like
you're gonna want to break that down.
I'm gonna do my best.
Okay.
But we can look at porn, and well, they're consenting to it. Yeah, but you're also ruining the minds of an entire generation. Your average 12-year-old has seen more naked women than the most brutal warlord in history.
See, that's like pulled straight from Peterson. Like that exact point. I swear to God, I heard him say that. I
don't know. I'm not trying to channel the man, and I haven't. The last thing that I saw that Peterson was in was What is a Woman?
And he was actually only in that relatively briefly.
Exactly.
By comparison.
That's what I'm saying. And if I'm channeling him, it's by pure mistake. Or
it's because he's become one with the collective unconscious. That's not true at all.
So what went through my head?
Peterson is the freakazoid of Jungian psychology.
You know that thing, Cerebro. Dr. X from the X-Men.
Yes.
Dr. Xavier. He gets into it and he puts it on, except it's Peterson, and he walks up, he sits down, and he puts a lobster on his head. And taps into the collective unconscious.
That's great.
That's what popped in my head.
Okay. But yeah, so break this down. This issue that you have with consent.
I'm not saying that consent is irrelevant.
Right.
But it is not the chief concern of something being moral.
How do
you can consent to a lot of awful shit that will do you and a bunch of other people a lot of harm.
See, it's the bunch of other people. That's an important point. If it does you harm, okay, you made that decision. Now, nothing that harms you only harms you, to be fair.
Yes.
But if it only physically harms you, I think that is a good enough place to draw the line. It's like, if it only physically harms you, even if it emotionally harms other people, you know what? I'm sorry to those other people, but you gotta have agency. You gotta have autonomy.
I think the question there, when it's if they're consenting to it, it basically comes down to where's the harm in it?
No, that's not what it comes down to.
And what else are you really asking?
What I'm saying is the only thing that matters in those situations is that somebody had the agency to make their own decision, and morally, I think we need to uphold that.
All right, should we not send prisoners to prison? Or should we not send people who are convicted of crimes to prison? They're not consenting to it.
Well, no, but it's the nature of the crime that dictates whether or not they go to prison. And
but they don't. They really don't want to go to prison.
Well, that doesn't matter in that situation because let me finish. Mm-hmm. Because it's based on a crime. It's not just prison. Like that's not the only thing involved in that.
Well, why is the crime important?
Because it's the nature of what they did and who they harmed. That's what it's about. That's the basis of it.
So consent's not key here for this to be moral.
Well, you're looking at the wrong source. You're looking at the wrong foundation when you're asking me that question, because the foundation of that is the nature of the crime, not the fact that they're being sent to prison. They're being sent to prison because they committed a crime. What was the crime? That's what matters.
Well, all right, statutory rape.
Okay.
14-year-old consented.
Mm-hmm.
Should that be allowed?
No, because I do think we need it does get a little hairy here. We need to be able to establish at what point a person is mentally developed enough to be able to make good decisions for themselves. And that's a hairy area, but I think we can answer that question reasonably well with empirical biological neurological evidence. I think that's pretty reasonable.
So take that as a case-by-case basis?
No, not necessarily.
Well, I mean, everyone develops at a different rate. We can prove that empirically.
Yeah, but not to the degree that some people, sexually mature at, 13 versus 30. Like, that doesn't happen. At least not very often.
Well, no, we're not. I mean, why not 14? Why not 15? We can look at their brains and compare them to other people.
That's why the age of consent isn't until you get to usually between 16 and 18.
Depending on what state you're living in. Indiana is one of the weird ones where we have 16.
Yeah.
Some states it's 16, but you have to be 18 to engage in homosexual activity, which is
weird to me.
A little bit.
Yeah. Not that the homosexual activity is weird to me, although that's weird to me, but that's a me thing. It's that you have that difference in the age gap.
I think it's a bit weird from a biological perspective. It's like there's no evolutionary advantage. How is this still here? That's a bit strange.
I've thought about that too, and it's like, well, there must be, I would imagine there must be something to it. If we're just going with strict evolutionary biology or whatever. Like, maybe it's a one of those, like, long game evolutionary counter... What's a good word for that? Counter forces? I don't really know what to call it. When we get to a point where we're populating very quickly and it may seem that resources are getting scarce. I don't know. You kind of get what I'm going at here. It's like maybe when a population gets so large, you start to see more of that in the biology of that particular creature. But I don't know of any support for that theory at all.
No, the closest you could look at would be the the Mouse-Calhoun experiments, and that wasn't so much species-wide as it was society-wide.
Yeah. But, I mean, homosexuality, I mean, you do see it in more species than just human, very clearly. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not knowledgeable enough on it. But, I mean, as far as that kind of stuff goes, to me, it's like, yeah, two consenting adults doing something that doesn't harm anyone other than maybe themselves, and homosexuality doesn't necessarily do that. So I'm not trying to make that equivalency. But if you have two consenting adults, they should be able to do whatever they want with each other. And, okay, fine.
Including murder and cannibalism. Excuse me, homicide and cannibalism.
This may be where I'm, at least currently, on the extreme. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's...
If one party gets consents to being eaten...
Where is the good in that?
That's not a question that's of concern to me in a situation like that. You are responsible for your own decisions. If that means you consented to being eaten, that's on you, pal.
I mean...
I'm not forgiving...
It seems to me that, like, you guys should probably, like, I don't know, get therapy.
Yeah, maybe, but that's not my damn business.
That's one of those. Okay, are you determined of? Have you been determined of sound mind? That
I don't know.
No, if yeah, I want to be eaten while being fucked, and no, nope, no, that's not good. There's no good that's coming out of that.
I agree, but it's also not my life and none of my business.
It's going to become someone's business. So
if it's not consensual, yeah.
It's going to... No, even if it is consensual, it's going to become someone else's business.
Yeah, well, that person... Okay, so maybe you're saying maybe like a sister or a brother or something of the person that consented to being eaten, right?
And taxpayer money is going to go towards the investigation of this whole thing, because it's going to come out eventually.
Yeah.
That's costing everybody something here, man.
I mean, we do that with every other investigation.
Yeah. But this one's consensual, but that's apparently okay now.
There's a difference between something being okay and something being legal. Like, to me, this all centers around, like, my fundamental axiom here.
So you're going to say that it's okay, but it should be illegal.
No, I'm saying the opposite of that.
Or
it should be legal, but I don't think it's okay.
Okay.
Did people who had a choice in the matter agree for this event to take place? All right, pal, you made your decision. None of my business. I'm not going to try to force my morals into that situation.
Consent has no limits. As long as as long as two adults are consenting to it, it's perfectly fine.
Well, it has limits in that if it starts to harm other people in ways that are otherwise illegal, then yeah. You've crossed a line.
So, two people in a suicide pact decide to blow each other up with rocket launchers.
There are things that are illegal about that.
No one gets hurt, though.
Property's damaged, so somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, but it's public property. Who cares? It's taxpayer.
Well, it's still illegal.
It's just taxpayer money being wasted.
Well, it's still illegal to destroy public property with a rocket launcher.
With sniper rifles in the middle of the street. That's perfectly fine.
Better.
Both consented to it.
Better, but still, I would say
no crime committed here.
Reckless endangerment.
No, they're expert marksmen. Everyone knows it.
I mean, I guess if that's how the case shakes out, okay.
And they intentionally use frangible ammunition to avoid overpenetration.
Yeah, okay. I mean, my only concern in that situation is how much other people were put in danger.
Now, what if they do it in front of a school?
Reckless endangerment.
No, the guns aren't even pointed. It's what they knew exactly what they were doing. There was no recklessness to it.
That can still be reckless endangerment.
Well, if you're going to apply that, then anything can be reckless endangerment.
You're going 75 in a school zone, but you're going on the road. You're not driving into the yard of the school.
Yeah, there you go.
That's still reckless endangerment.
I've seen plenty of people do that.
Yeah, and they don't
get pulled over for it.
Sometimes they do, but yeah, it doesn't happen often.
No,
I've seen cops watch it happen and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Several times, actually. It's very frustrating. But, yeah, no, I just... I'm sorry. It's not my job to save you from yourself. I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting pulled into those weeds. None of my business. If it starts harming people or endangers people that did not consent to be involved in that situation, yes, you've got a problem. But outside of that, nope. It's on you, buddy.
No,
I've not heard an argument against it that is sufficient for me. Every argument I've heard against it
Fair
is,
enough.
But morally, I disagree. Well, okay. Can you make an argument for it that holds up?
I don't like the idea that...
There it is.
Yeah, fine. That as long as no one's being hurt, it's perfectly acceptable.
Legally acceptable. You got to make that distinction because it has to do with respecting your autonomy.
Well, here's the thing. It might not... Culture has a way of infecting policy. And vice versa.
Okay.
So, if you build a culture where everything is permissible as long as no one gets hurt, you're going to end up with laws that really start to reflect all this.
It's not everything is permissible as long as nobody gets hurt. It's individual autonomy is protected as long as you do not hurt or needlessly endanger other people.
Okay, anything is permissible as long as no one is hurt or endangered. That's the culture you're trying to build there.
That's a really, really general and vague axiom, we'll say. So I'm inclined, because it rings of absolutism, which rubs me the wrong way. But I would say, as a general rule, yes.
I do not want to live in the culture that would breed. At all.
Okay, so what do you do in a situation like that?
I don't know. Hey, fucking stop.
Why?
State my case. This is bad for everyone involved. This is bad for this to exist anywhere near people.
Why?
These people should get help.
By what authority do you make that determination?
It erodes at the very fabric that holds a society together. If you want to have a society and not just an anarchic kill zone or, I don't know, decadent circus, you need to impose some pretty strict limits on human behavior. And this is being drawn from Locke in the social contract. You give up some of your freedoms to be protected in other ways.
I once heard you say, and this was recently, very recently, that you do believe that people should have the right to punch their own clock.
Yes.
Why does it matter what method they use to do that?
I'm going to have to think about that. Give me a week or so.
Because cannibalism is a way of doing that. Now, it is a grotesque method for doing it. Admittedly, I think most people would agree to that. But that would be my strongest question to you: is why does it matter what method they use, especially if they're in the privacy of their own home or somebody else's home and they both consented to that situation? So, I mean, and you got to remember that if something like that happens in an apartment building that you live in and it's legal, and most people know it's legal, most people are going to look at that and like, well, that's really fucking disgusting and weird, but, well, so be it, I guess.
With suicide, there's no way to enforce it.
Not if you're successful, no.
Right, and that's my biggest reason why there's no sense in passing anything, and why that is an actual right.
Yeah.
One of the few things that I would actually recognize as a human right.
Yeah, and I do too.
A lot of the things that people do recognize as human rights, I really don't. But yeah, punching your own ticket, there's no way to... Committing suicide, for those who aren't clued in. Oh, you killed yourself. We're going to send you to prison now.
Somebody get this dead body out of my cell.
Can I have another fucking cell, please?
I don't know, man. He's got another 30 years.
All right, corpsey, shower time.
All right. No, what? No. We've decided this is going to be an ad-free episode of the Arbitrarium where we just keep going. We just march forward. But if we're going to do that, let's see how long we've been at this. Oh, God. Probably about an hour.
Yeah, we will stop for a smoke break.
Okay, we're not, no commercials. I'm just going to, it's going to be like no time passed for you at all.
All right, now that we've had a cigarette and refreshed our beverages, what are you drinking tonight, Dave?
Somewhat of a new concoction. It's basically a Jack and Coke, but I added sweet vermouth and Angostura bitters. It's actually pretty tasty.
You can call it a Dave and Coke.
But there's Jack in it. I'll think of a name for it.
A Jack and Dave. Jack and the Dave.
Little whiskey.
I'm drinking just a pretty weak Jack and Coke.
It is pretty weak. I saw the whiskey in there.
I gotta sleep later. Contrary to popular belief, I do in fact sleep.
Yes. So we were when we left off, we were basically still kind of talking about. Well, I was actually asking you to break down your this issue of consent, and we kind of went down that rabbit hole for a little bit. But as we were outside taking a break, we thought maybe we'll sort of change course a little bit for the second half of this episode. And
I haven't thought about a little bit of that. I think one of my issues with consent is it pushes the acceptance of vice as well. It's not, they want to do it, so we should just accept that they do it. Instead of, no, that's a vice, and they shouldn't do it, and we all know they shouldn't do it, and we should tell them they shouldn't do that, because it's bad for them. Like porn, or smoking, or drinking excessively. These are vices.
Okay, Dr. Cocteau.
Fair. But you can accept that something's a vice and not ban it.
Yes, and that is where I stand. Literally right in that space. That is my philosophy.
When a vice becomes excessive, I think those who actually love those people should step in and say, "Wait, I don't want to see you destroy yourself."
Do you think a person should have the legal right to force an alcoholic into AA?
God, I wish I could.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. I wish I could.
Do you think it should be legal to do that, though? To force someone into a recovery situation that they're unwilling to take on? Would it help them if they were unwilling?
If you had a legal mechanism where you could plead your case to the court, something along the lines of a lawsuit, not criminal law, yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Now, there are situations where that can be done.
Yes, but only when they're threatening self-harm or the harm of others.
Exactly. And for me, that is a good line.
But,
I think that's...
But for some reason, drinking oneself to death does not count as self-harm, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, because I think it's probably because it's so damn difficult to judge properly. Like, at what point are they actually drinking themselves to death? When does that line get drawn? How do you enforce something like that?
Mandated rehab, but
that's after. No, that is the reinforcement.
You were taught that's how you enforce that. You asked how you enforce that. That's how you enforce that. How do you draw that line?
Right.
That's where it comes to a case basis on like a civil lawsuit. Lawsuits are, contrary to popular belief, they don't follow criminal law. There is a standard of evidence, but it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, which is criminal law. You have preponderance of evidence,
right,
which is civil lawsuit.
Well, there's actually maybe a better analog for this conversation: illicit drug use. Because people have made this argument where it's like, no, people should be free to use illicit drugs if they are making that decision on their own and they're not harming anyone else. There are people who make that argument. Now, admittedly, up until this point, I've never even considered possibly, like, where would I have to stand on that based on what I've said? And I'm probably going to need more time to think about that.
I mean, you've seen someone in the throes of heroin addiction.
Oh yeah, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare.
It's up there with things you wouldn't wish on an. I wouldn't say worst enemy, because I would wish that on my worst enemy. I'm not going to say I'm a saint. I am rather vindictive when I need to be. Okay, when I want to be.
When do you need to be?
In a firefight.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I understand that. I like to naively believe that you don't have to feel vindication when in a firefight, but I've not been in one, so I'll reserve my judgment on that.
Well, the vindictive part was what caused the firefight.
Yeah, well...
You know, someone blows up a truck full of diesel fuel outside of Madrasa.
Right.
I felt perfectly justified in having the fury of God fill me.
Yeah. Well, you know me and the arguments that I made on that. It's like, I would like to believe, and I do think this is the most virtuous way to go about it, where you can acknowledge the necessity of violence in those ways without feeling joy in doing it, in enacting it. The regret of its necessity. To me, that is virtuous.
Yeah.
But I also won't judge someone who's in a situation like that and who goes after that person for, in a war, especially in a war situation, for personal reasons. I cannot in good conscience judge someone particularly harshly for that.
Yeah, you know, you get the regret later.
Yeah, yeah.
Never did on that one. Anyway, so
well, again, that particular situation is one, and we've talked about this, where it's like, you know, you regret that you had to do it, but you still acknowledge that it needed to be done.
That particular one?
Okay, well.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of, real quickly,
settle that, yeah.
Kind of lay out my hypothesis of natural rights and that they don't exist. Outside of very, very few.
Mm-hmm.
So what we often think of as like the basics of natural rights, as passed down to us from the Enlightenment thinkers, are life, liberty, and property. Not pursuit of happiness. That was an invention of the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think those are natural rights.
I want to reiterate this just so the listeners are very clear that we are distinguishing natural rights from civil rights in this moment, in this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, a natural right is something that you have. Just and by virtue of your existence, you have this right.
Yeah.
Life. Let's start with that first one. Do you have a right to life?
Naturally, no.
No, you can. Let me drop you in the Canadian Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
With just a knife and some pants and a shirt and when a Kodiak grizzly comes at you, what is going to help you in that situation? Telling the grizzly that you shouldn't be eaten.
A well-designed protest sign.
Right, because you have the natural right to life.
With a pun, those help.
Mm-hmm, yes, with a pun.
And if it rhymes, even better.
Hey, hey, ho, ho. This here bear's got to go. This here bear's just got to go. Thank you. The cadence seemed off a bit.
Yeah.
That bear's going to eat your ass. What might help you, maybe, possibly, is making the knife into a spear. Maybe. You have the right to defend your life. No one can take that away from you.
Yeah.
You can try to attempt to defend your life. It might be in vain, but you still have the right to try that. That can't be taken away.
Yeah.
Even if you were in absolute chains, you can scream, you can do anything to attempt to save your own existence.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have the right to that existence.
Yeah.
So, life, no. You can scream at the ocean while you're drowning, and it still will ignore you.
Right. Well, it's like you said, what we were talking about outside. We can boil this down to your natural rights are what you can secure and protect for yourself.
Yes.
And that's it. I'm with you on that. If we are distinguishing natural rights, yes, absolutely. Because you can, like, that's demonstrable. To me, that's enough to say it's empirical.
Liberty. That's the next one. You have a right to liberty. No.
For the same reasons.
Mm-hmm. You can be placed in chains and scream about your liberty, or trapped by a boulder and scream that you need to be free.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be ignored.
Yeah.
Property.
All the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that we try to mention beyond what we defined as what you can secure and protect for yourself, they're going to be, no, you don't have a natural right to that for those same reasons.
Yeah, and when it really comes down to it, the only rights that you have are the ones that you are willing to fight, die, and kill for.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to do that, then you don't have those rights.
I would say you still technically have them, you're just not exercising them. They're there.
Well, no, those aren't rights now. They're privileges.
I mean, that you give yourself.
That they exist at the behest of other people. Someone can just, yeah, okay, I don't like this liberty thing that you got going on. I don't like your property, so I'm just going to come take it.
Yeah, but you forfeited it, and you at any given moment still have a right to. You can still revoke that at any time. Naturally.
Revoke what? Something got lost here.
When you forfeit those, you're saying once you forfeit those things, you're not willing to fight for them anymore. Then you no longer have those rights. It's like maybe practically, but naturally you still have them. You're just not exercising them. And if you forfeit those to some other group of people,
well, no, it's not a forfeiture. It's not a forfeiture.
If you say you're unwilling to do it, and then someone else has come in and said, "All right, well then I'll do it for you."
Well, if someone's doing it for you, well, then you've still got some measure of protection against it. You're just you're outsourcing the fighting, dying, and killing.
Okay.
To someone else.
If you're unwilling to, what I'm struggling with here is you said if you're unwilling to fight for those things, then you no longer have a right to them.
Yeah, if you show an absolute just unwillingness, yeah, I'm not going to fight for these things, then you don't have them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
okay, maybe
that's
we're
what I mean by
here,
unwilling. Like, if you kind of like, all right, you're not actively thinking about it, you're not actively fighting for it at those times. That doesn't mean you're unwilling to.
Mm.
If you are willing to do these things, then you have them. Now you might lose in the attempt, but at least you're going to give the other person pause. Who's looking to take your life, to take your liberty, take your property.
Mm.
And the whole pursuit of happiness, that's another thing that can't be taken away. Someone burning at a stake can pursue happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Monks do it.
I mean, they're not on a stake. Maybe the stake makes a difference.
I'm going to commit symbolic suicide. Yes, but do you have a stake?
Well,
sorry, no stake, no virtue.
So, well, people might be wondering, Garrett, what about the Constitution? The Constitution. Now we're no longer.
Became Jeff Goldblum there.
Yeah. I have a picture of him up here somewhere. He's holding a baby dinosaur. Yes.
Yeah, it's the rat.
Oh, it's packed. It's packed. I'm in the middle of moving, for those who don't know. So,
but Garrett,
when you're talking about things that are enshrined in law, as you have the right to vote, you have the right to a fair trial or a speedy trial, hopefully a fair one. These are not natural rights. These are civic rights.
There are civic rights, but to be fair, somebody somewhere at some point fought so that you would have them, because if they didn't, you wouldn't.
Right. But they're not natural.
Yeah.
The only natural rights you have are attempts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have a right to water. You have the right to seek water. Doesn't mean you'll succeed. You don't have the right to succeed at that.
Right.
So, I guess this is the bone I have to pick with Enlightenment thinkers. Granted, they're coming from a far less secular age than us. That's all I really had to say there.
And that's all I have to say about that.
And that's how the human manifesto crumbles.
Not your best Walter Cronkite?
There's a little bit too much Nixon in that one.
And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
So, what else is going on in the world? Didn't like a bunch of animated shows just get shut down?
Yeah, so one of the things we were going to do, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we were going to try to change directions a little bit on things that were happening and talk about entertainment media. And we actually have a good segue for that right now, which is the existence, much to the chagrin of everyone, of a series called Velma. Handle the producer. So the segue here is that we kind of went from socio-political issues to hopefully talking about...
some philosophical issues.
To some philosophical issues, but in moving into and hopefully talking about some entertainment media issues. And
why do we care about entertainment media? I'll tell you why I care about this.
Okay.
Entertainment influences culture. Culture is upstream of politics. This is why I care about entertainment. I don't watch a lot of it. I actually hate most of the people that produce it. But I care about it because it influences culture.
Yeah. It's the same reason I care about philosophy. And philosophy is at the... From what I can tell, philosophy seems to be at the tip of the mountain. If the river of culture seems to begin at philosophy. Some intellectual son of a bitch somewhere said something, and people in the education system usually start teaching it, and then people start believing it, and those people take that shit everywhere they go.
And often misunderstand it.
Yes. Yeah. But I haven't been able to find anything that has rested itself above philosophy in terms of where does human thought begin, and then how does it spider out into every other part of human life.
Prometheus, the Greek god of thought.
See, and then I thought, Prometheus. What's the opposite of Prometheus?
Epimetheus.
Well, yeah, Epimetheus.
That was his brother.
So Velma.
Yeah.
All right, so
I've not watched a single episode of it.
I've watched 3, and they're all really bad.
What makes it so bad, Dave? Tell us.
I've already done a review on it, and I'm loath to spend a lot of time on it again, because, as at least one commenter pointed out, my review is longer than the episode.
To be fair, you covered 2 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I spent the vast majority of it on episode 1, and then just sort of tacked on some things about episode 2 at the end. But yeah, I think it was like 10 minutes at the end about episode 2, But yeah, so what happened with Velma is essentially that... So it's a Mindy Kaling project, although she didn't create or write it. At least none of the episodes up to this point.
Who is Mindy Kaling? Mindy
Kaling is a comedian. You might have seen her on The Office.
Nope.
She's a South Asian. She's an Indian comedian. Younger Indian comedian lady. Anyway... It was actually created by a guy named, I believe this is the creator, was Charlie Grandy. He created the show, and it's been called Mindy Kaling's pet project, so I'm assuming she was kind of involved in that somehow, but I don't know the details. Anyway, they created this show, Mindy Kaling and Charlie Grandy show, this show called Velma, and it's a modern take on the character of Velma and the Scooby-Doo gang, except without Scooby-Doo. Well, without Scooby-Doo as a dog. In this iteration, I haven't seen the episode with this, but apparently Scooby shows up as a black woman.
Oh my God!
Scoobi. Now, don't quote me on this, but this is just what I'm hearing secondhand about.
Oh,
Velma.
the racism!
At some point, the character of Scooby is reimagined as a black woman, a young black woman. And it's Scoobi, of course, not a Y. Anyway, so yeah. What's happening in this series is that it's supposed to be a more progressive, satirical take on the Scooby-Doo universe. Except it doesn't really have anything to do with the Scooby-Doo universe. Like, nothing. The only crossover, carryover there really is that there is a mystery of people getting murdered. So in the original Scooby-Doo series, it was made for kids.
The same name.
And some characters share the same name, and the vague, superficial design of the characters from which they're based. But everybody hates this show. It has brought people together from the left and the right in just abject loathing over what has been created. This is the hubris of Mindy Kaling made manifest, and we are all in awe. And it's because it took the progressive, some of those progressive points, like, I mean, there's race swapping in it, but that tends to be something that most people don't care as much about as a lot of the other things.
It can be very well done.
Yeah.
And actually reinforced, like, just real quick.
Sure.
Dune.
See, I'm not familiar with I've not actually read the books, but I can...
In every other visual representation of Dune, be it the David Lynch movie or the 2000 sci-fi miniseries, Dr. Liette Kynes was a white dude. Now it's a black woman, and it makes a lot more sense considering this is fucking Arrakis.
Right.
Fair-skinned people are not going to do well in the sands of Arrakis.
Right. And
it works really well. They handled it well, and the great thing about it, they did it, and they didn't draw attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a big thing with Velma is it is so what's the right word? Self-aware. It is painfully self-aware. It's one of those shows that it makes a joke, and then you can just feel the writers telling you to laugh. Like, that's how self-aware this thing is. We've talked about this with Family Guy and how it's gotten to that point where it's just like the character delivers the joke as if it's a joke, but there's not actually a punchline there, really.
And now you will laugh, ching chak.
Yeah, it's like, what? Where's the joke? Like, there's a moment in Velma where she's been arrested and brought in for questioning over these murders, and the two detectives come in. It's a lesbian interracial couple, and they're the adopted parents of Daphne in this series. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, whatever, not that important. But they walk into the interrogation room, and they know Velma, and they actually like Velma because Daphne and Velma used to be friends, and then Velma got hot and was mean to Daphne, and so Daphne...
You mean Daphne got hot and was mean to Velma?
Yeah, strike that, reverse it. So they know her, and they actually like Velma, and they come in, and they're like, hey, Velma, how's it going? Or what's up? And she says something to the effect of, or like, what's real or whatever, and she says, well, God's not real if you two are running this investigation. It's delivered like there's a punchline there, but there isn't an actual joke in that. And
then they at one point draw their guns on her.
They do draw in
the interrogation room.
Yeah, and that's just the weird self-aware bad humor of it. There's also the story of it, which is just a mess.
It makes the cops look awful.
Oh, they're actually aware of how awful they are. They know this. In fact, this is what destroys any semblance of a reasonable story, because in that same scene, they tell Velma, hey, you're a suspect in these murders. We don't think you did it. The reason we brought you in is because we know we're incompetent and we need your help to solve the case. So you have 24 hours.
So we're going to threaten you with guns.
So you have 24 hours to solve the case of which you are suspected, or we arrest you. That's it. That's what's happening in this story. In the first episode, in episode 1. They suspect her, although these detectives apparently don't suspect her. She's a suspect in a case of serial killings. And
they're the detectives. They identify the suspects.
And the detectives on the case tell her, we know we don't think you did it, but you're a suspect, and we're stupid and incompetent, and we wouldn't be able to solve this, but we need your help to solve this mystery. So you, Madam Suspect, you have 24 hours to solve the case for us, or you're going to jail for murder.
In what universe did this make sense? In what universe was this funny?
Grandyverse? I don't know. I almost said Kalingverse, but I still want to be as fair as I can to Mindy Kaling. She didn't write it. She didn't create the show. So, credit where it's supposed to be due. I don't know, but yeah.
Excuse me.
Ching chang.
Let's put it this way. There's a throat that needs slitting, and we don't need to know where to lay the blade. Is that a fair assessment of what you mean?
For legal reasons, I decline to comment.
Yeah, she's a Davidian.
A Davidian?
Oh, Dravidian, excuse me.
A Dravidian. What do you mean by Dravidian?
South Asian or South Indian.
Oh, I didn't know that was a word. I never heard that word before.
Yes, you got the Indo-Aryans and the Dravidians. Huh. That's why people from northern India tend to have much lighter skin than those from southern India. It's a different ethnic group.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and fun fact about just like weird things about India. That caste system that they had for, close to 5,000 years. Mm-hmm. The people in the same village from different castes have more genetic difference between themselves than those from like Norway to Sicily.
Huh.
Because for so long they had been kept marrying inside that caste.
Right. Huh. That's actually interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, India's a weird place, man. Like you can draw up any rule about civilization and India will break it.
All right, so
back to Velma.
Well, we are trying to get somewhere with Velma instead of just Dave bitching about Velma hour.
This isn't going to be an hour, is it?
So anyway, what's happened with the show is that the, for lack of better words, progressive points of modern storytelling, where you do things
Fred
like
being the white dude is the butt of every joke.
Oh yeah, it's worse than that. He is the butt of every joke, but they make him as unforgivably and unrealistically pathetic as they can. He, as Velma said, is a rich white dude with a small dong. That is a line from the series. We are supposed to hate Fred, even though Velma actually has a crush on him. It's really confusing. She simultaneously hates him and also wants to jump his bones real hard. Anyway, so, but there's things in it like race swapping, and I keep bringing that up, so we'll sideline that because we've already talked about it. But there's also like the opening credits of the show. Of the first episode is the shower scene with like the 15-year-old high school girls literally buck-ass naked wrestling around in the girls' locker room at high school. So we're already running into some weird problems here as far as what these people were willing to put on TV.
Very convenient bubble clouds.
Oh, yeah. But, and then there's this meta commentary between these characters about how pilots episodes always have more gratuitous nudity in order to bring people in and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So they're
not wrong about that.
No, they're not. And the joke is that they're doing it as they're critiquing it. Yeah, there's one part in that scene where one of the characters is like, it's one of the girls, she's like, I actually love the gratuitous sexuality in the pilot episodes. People do it because it works, and in an oversaturated market, you need a hook. And my thinking here is, okay, so you're saying that the market is oversaturated with series who use sexuality to sell the pilot. And so in order to succeed in that, you need a hook. And a hook is a thing that makes it unique from other shows. And your hook is to use overt sexuality in the pilot oversaturated by pilots with overt sexuality.
And cops pulling guns on 15-year-old girls.
Yes.
That are already in custody.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the most unique thing there. I just can't get past that.
Well, what's funny is she tries to walk out, and that's when they pull the guns on her, and she far as I can tell, has every right to leave. Although they arrested her. I don't know. It's a really confusing situation from writers who clearly have no idea how any of that works at all.
It's either they have no idea how that works, or they honestly don't care.
I don't think they care. I think
it's more that they don't care.
I think they give themselves... Because they could have
found out how that works.
Yeah. Well, they give themselves carte blanche. Blanc?
Blanc.
I always thought it was Blanc, but it actually is spelled C-H-E. I don't know. Anyway. They give themselves carte blanche because
French
it's comedy.
Is a real language.
Because it's comedy. It's like, well, we want to be funny, so who gives a shit about any realistic details in this? We're trying to be funny. It's like, well, you still got to sell the audience on some of these moments, and you're really not doing that very well.
Yeah, you gotta. This is something else. Like, I get that the idea of restrictions sounds bad, but you can when you give yourself a box to work within.
Restriction breeds creativity. That's something that has been established and is actually accepted by most of the artistic community.
Except them, obviously not.
We know that there are rules for what determine what type of art you're doing. In film, we have things like genres that dictate...
I commissioned you for a sculpture. I made you a film.
Huh.
It's a film of me making a sculpture that I sold to someone else.
There's a Banksy project for you. But yeah, so you got that kind of stuff, and then you know there's the Fred's a rich white guy, and we're supposed to hate him because he's rich and he's white, and he's a man-child, and he doesn't even know how to cut his own food, like all of that shit. And most people that were watching this were just like, this is... It was so bad on how hard it pushed that humor that it spawned conspiracy theories that Mindy Kaling and the creators of the show were actually conservatives who were intentionally caricaturizing progressive political talking points in order to
discredit them,
and subvert them. You know, that actually happened. So the point I'm getting at here, since we're kind of moving in that direction, the segue is the social politics that were presented at offensively cartoonish degrees in Velma got backlash from not just people on the right or the conservatives, but from people on the left for like, you're going to make them think we're fucking insane and bitter and resentful. And it's like, well...
We already thought that.
We did already think that.
Now we just have proof positive.
I'm not going to say that. That's taking it a bit far. If I'm looking at Velma and saying, all the progressives think of this shit.
I will not retract my statement.
I'm not doing that. That's a bit too absolutist for me. I've met progressives who were good people. I disagreed with them intensely on...
I didn't say anything bad about them. I just said they're fucking idiots.
What I will say is it is somewhat part and parcel, and I'm really loath to say that because I don't want to generalize too much. But in my personal experience, it is part and parcel of the way that a fair amount of the people who are really far left or progressive have engaged with me when it comes to talking about these types of things.
They caricaturize themselves.
They caricaturize me, that's for damn sure. I am so sick and tired of arguing with people who are arguing with a caricature of me. It's like, I don't know who the hell you're talking to, but it's not me.
Yeah.
I don't know that person. I've known people like that person, and I don't like them. But it's not me. But anyway, yeah, so it maybe in some sense it held up a funhouse mirror to some liberals and progressives, and they were just kind of like, okay, maybe we need to back up and evaluate just a little bit to make sure we don't end up here.
So Velma may have been the greatest, worst project ever made.
It could have been. Yeah, it might have been. Because like I said before, I feel like we're starting to move back toward a reasonable spectrum as far as the general public is concerned in the way that they view things. Because I've had more peaceful conversations with progressives over the last year than I have had in a long time. Over those years where it was awful. The
one progressive that I spoke to, I don't speak to anymore over this here.
But yeah, it's...
Over the Dobbs decision.
Oh, well. But yeah, I think that's...
All I said was, I'm not pissed off about it. And, it's because you weren't affected.
I think I know. I'm assuming I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So that's our segue into talking about entertainment media, and we probably got about a half hour left, or we're going to cut this off at... Oh, we got like 15 minutes if we're going to cut this off at 2 hours. But, okay, so do you have any particular questions about... Oh, baby stuff.
Yeah, do you guys have any questions about baby stuff?
Well, there's baby stuff happening.
I got a lot of baby stuff. I need to get rid of it.
We're gonna monitor this baby monitor. I'm gonna pause. We'll be back momentarily.
A moment for you, a crying baby for about 25 minutes for us.
Yep.
And we kind of forgot what we just said.
Well, we were talking about... I don't remember exactly where we left off, and we can't review because of the way that this recording works. But we were talking about... I was using Velma to sort of segue us into a discussion on the state of the entertainment media industry. So, did you have anything particular you wanted, any particular direction? I could talk about a whole bunch of different things.
I mean, most of the media that I watch, and therefore most of the media that I feel confident commenting on, falls firmly in the genre fiction.
Genre.
I guess. Genre.
Yeah. The genre of genre fiction.
Science fiction, a little bit of fantasy, but mostly sci-fi.
Yeah.
And from what I'm seeing, over the past several years, the big sci-fi names are, and what I mean by the big names in sci-fi, I mean Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate, although we haven't heard much about Stargate. There's a little bit. Amazon apparently picked them up from MGM.
Okay.
For the most part, they become hollowed out shells of themselves, and not just because of the message.
What do you mean by the message?
Progressive politics. Updated for modern audiences. Not just because of that, but
I just imagined a disclaimer like we used to get at the beginning of VHS tapes. This film has been formatted to fit your worldview. It has been edited from its original version.
Yeah, it's kind of what we're looking at. But not just because of that. It seems that when you get the message pushers, it'd be one thing if they were, okay, you can have whatever politics you want, but if you can tell me a good story,
yeah,
okay. But a lot of the message pushers they're not capable of doing that.
No, they're so concerned about the message that they're pushing that they aren't putting enough effort into developing the story. Now, that's not the case with all of them. Because there are certain messages in shows like even The Owl House for me that when I'm watching, I'm like, eh. And actually, that really doesn't actually have much to do with the prevalence of like gay relationships or trans relationships or anything like that. It actually has more to do with the sort of life advice philosophies that some of the themes tackle. And I've always had a problem with the love me for who I am sort of mentality, because it's like, no, you want to, if you want to make sure that people are miserable, tell them they're just perfectly fine the way they are. Because they know they're not. And if you tell someone that, where can they go from there? What do they have left in life if they are perfect just the way they are?
Well, Rousseau has the answer to that.
Go on.
Burn down society because society made everything wrong.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, there's that, yeah.
That's Rousseau. He's the one who came up with that.
Boy, he predicted the shit out of that.
No, he advocated the shit out of that.
Oh, yeah, see, I don't like that.
He's part of the reason that the shit goes this way.
See, I'm not actually as familiar with Rousseau, which I probably should be, considering how much I like philosophy.
Well, it's that subset
I just know that
subset of philosophy that you tend to avoid, that I love. Political philosophy.
Oh, well. Hobbes and Rousseau.
Well, you got Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. Those are...
Yeah.
Those are your three big Enlightenment thinkers that everyone likes to quote and then can't remember exactly what they said. Or pretend to quote and can't remember exactly what they said. Well, Rousseau was very much in the... He kind of came up with the noble savage concept, that people are born naturally good.
That part I know of Rousseau, yeah. That's his sort of thing.
Society is the corrupting influence. If we got rid of society, people would be good again.
I would love to know, and maybe reading Rousseau would help this, but how the hell he came to that conclusion? Like, what evidence was he drawing on?
Bigotry of low expectations.
The bigotry of... Okay, yeah, we've heard about that. The soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you're in an urban society, or you're in an urbanized area, and you look around and you see the destitute and all that, and it's like, oh man, you know, they're around all this opulence, and yet they don't have anything. You know, they'd be better off like the savages in the woods who don't even know about all the wonderful things. They're not corrupted by it. They don't have envy because they don't know what can happen.
Okay.
And if they never developed this level of civilization, they would be just as happy as they are right now, because they can't.
To Rousseau's credit, there is something about that does have statistical validation. And when I say that, what I mean is that I'm not going to say that human nature is just going to magically become great when you put people in a situation like that, because it won't. But it does seem to be true statistically that areas of high crime, it's not where people are the most poor. It's where people who are particularly poor and people who are particularly rich live in close proximity to each other. That seems to be the identifier of where you're going to find the highest crime rates in any human society. It's where those two people can see each other real clearly from pretty close.
He also started dismissing, you know, the absolute brutal wars that happened between various tribes around the planet, and I'm not just talking about Indians.
Yeah.
He had no concept of how absolutely brutal those societies could be.
Yeah.
Just, it was, part of it came from the overwhelming military advantage that Europe in general, and France in particular, enjoyed at the time.
Yeah.
That, well, they can't stand up to us. They're just not capable of warfare. Yeah.
Not at your level.
That's where it is. That's the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Bush, I think Bush was the one who coined that phrase, I think, unless he got it from somewhere else.
He probably got it from somewhere else.
But I remember that's where I first heard that phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations. Yeah. Yeah, wasn't it?
You're just removing their agency.
Yeah. Wasn't it Wolf Blitzer? I know I've heard Carolyn talk about this a few times, where Wolf Blitzer, he was doing some kind of reporting, some quote unquote journalism, and they were talking about this poverty-stricken area. It was a black neighborhood, and he said something to the effect of, "They're just so poor and so black." It's like,
yeah, that was coverage of Katrina.
Wasn't that was Blitzer, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Wolf Blitzer during Katrina, and people, you know, some of the rioting, but also just general looting to survive because your whole fucking city's flooded. Yeah, that was him talking about that. You're just so poor and so black. It's like, fuck you, Blitzer.
How black are they? I'm sorry, I thought there was a joke here.
Cream in your coffee. Straight black. With a shot of Hennessy.
Oh, thank you, Kenan Thompson. Oh, man. Yeah, so we darted off on philosophy there. Between the two of us, we cover a fair amount of philosophy, because you've got the political philosophy and I've got the existential philosophy, and some people lump the phenomenologists in there, and I give them a half point out of a possible 1 point.
Yeah, I tend to engage with philosophy that has impacts on things outside of the self.
Yes. You're more of a practical, pragmatic, yeah.
Pragmatism is
I'm a pragmatist, but I like abstract pragmatism. there's still these things. Existential philosophy still has a very pragmatic effect on someone's life, but it's an abstract pragmatic effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's how do I interact with the outside world? Hear more. How do I interact with myself?
It's both, really, and that's what it comes down to. It's how do I interact with myself and the outside world in a way that's going to alleviate cognitive suffering. Maybe that's a good way to think about it. How am I supposed to engage with myself in the world so that I don't hate it as much?
Prozac.
Thank you, Jonathan Haidt. I'm just imagining a Joe Rogan episode with Jonathan Haidt where it only lasts for it lasts for a full 2 hours, and it's literally just, you ever done DMT? You ever tried Prozac? Have you ever done DMT though, man? Have you ever tried Prozac?
Yeah. So I was meditating while doing behavioral cognitive therapy, and I popped like 3 Prozac. And
Have you ever tried cleaning your room?
he's in the back room petting a lobster.
Anyway.
And another fucking Peterson lobster thing popped in my head. So they're threatening to take away his license.
Yeah.
Unless he goes to re-education.
He's got to go in front of the tribunal and be re-educated.
And they've got him in a cell. They open it. It's time. No. I'm not going. They take his lobster. Put him down!
There's nothing you can do to me to make me... Put my lobster down! Put him down! I'll go!
Get him away from the pot! Lobsters are so funny. They just are.
It's a funny animal. Funny creature.
I remember the Lobster Zone.
I do remember the Lobster Zone.
For those who are unaware, get on Google's image search and type in Lobster Zone vending machine.
It's a claw machine with live lobsters.
It is outstanding.
Uh-huh.
Every American home shall have one. When the rogue Republic of New Indiana rears its ugly head and me at the front, ruling as a iron-fisted dictator tyrant, everyone will own a Lobster Zone. It is mandatory to have one in your home. Or you will be put in a Lobster Zone.
Well, those who... we live in Indianapolis, and the place where we discovered that Lobster Zone was, and one of the few places people around the world might recognize, which is Speedway, Indianapolis, where the famous 500 track is.
Yeah, it's right off 16th Street.
Right off 16th
right next
Street.
to the track.
Mike's Pub or something? Mike's Bar?
Yeah, we only went there twice, and both times someone tried to hook me up with one of their friends. I went on one of those blind dates.
You did?
Yeah, it didn't go well.
Was this before you met Kat?
Yes.
Good God, has it been that long?
It's been that long.
Damn. All those lobsters are dead.
And they were delicious. I know.
The fuck are we talking about?
Media?
Yeah, we kept getting. I mean, we're doing.
Oh, right.
The real arbitrarium here, where we just keep getting sidetracked.
You're the writers that have been pushing the message. They don't know how to write. The directors have some skill at times.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the creative staff tends to have a pretty good amount of skill. Like with Velma, most people who are criticizing it are still acknowledging that
the animation's good.
As far as adult animation goes, it's one of the best on TV right now, technically speaking.
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, but the writing and the world building is awful.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is pretty sad because the world had already been built in the 70s.
Yes. And when it comes to the big names in sci-fi, we've seen more so on the Star Trek side of things than the Star Wars side of things. The world building just fall through the floor.
Which again is pretty sad because the world started being built in the 70s.
60s.
Was it the late 60s? Technically, that's true of Scooby-Doo, too. It was started in, I think the first season was 1968 or 69. But yeah.
Yeah,
I thought the first movie came out in the real early 70s.
The first movie for Star Trek.
For Star Wars.
Oh. No,
I thought you were talking about Star Wars.
No, I'm talking about Star Trek in particular.
Oh,
both
okay.
Of them.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Trek came out in '66.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. That came out several years before Star Wars.
Over a decade.
See, I thought the first Star Wars movie was in like 1973 or something.
77.
Was it really? Okay.
77.
Okay.
So, I honestly think that, with the exception of Lower Decks, that actually embraces the world that Star Trek is in without trying to reinterpret it and redraw the lines, you've got... Discovery wrecks the continuity of the entire universe. Picard takes the beloved character of Picard and renders him nutless.
Well, I think one of the things that we will struggle with in order to complain about those things is that the people that were involved in the inception of Star Trek, and who knew Roddenberry and worked with Roddenberry, they all seem to have this philosophy of, and they seem to believe that Roddenberry would have been the same way. This philosophy of, look, Star Trek is about where are you going to take me next. It's not about sticking to everything that it ever was.
Yeah,
hardline.
You don't need to do that,
right?
People who look at me, who might
Nimoy and Patrick Stewart are both, among many others, vocal about that type of thing.
Yeah, that's fine. Take me somewhere else. And what are they doing with the actual shows?
Are you taking me somewhere that makes sense? Maybe that's a good question. Are you taking me somewhere that doesn't completely upend what had already been established as far as the universe is concerned? Because you got to be careful about that. Even if you're trying to take me somewhere new, it's like, okay, you can take me somewhere new, but I'm not really that interested in, a Tarantino-directed Star Trek movie or series. I'm not in it. I'm not, and Tarantino completely out and out, made no bones about it. He said, "Oh yeah, it's going to be like it's going to be what you're expecting. I'm Quentin Tarantino, and it's going to be Quentin Tarantino."
Yeah, I don't want that.
It's like I don't want that, man. Like, I like your movies, but I don't want Tarantino and Star Trek don't jive together.
Tying the political thing back, you're people who look at least me. I've heard this. It's how can you be a real Star Trek fan and not be a liberal? Because Star Trek has been fairly progressive on things. But there's a difference between, hey, we're going to present as close as we can the argument on both sides, and then we'll make a judgment, sure. But at least they presented the argument fairly. To, everyone who doesn't... Let's turn the Klingons into what we think Trump voters are.
Star Trek had, from what I can tell, traditionally been about exploring the argument and exploring the questions. That seems to, in the series that I love, TOS, TNG, and Deep Space Nine, and Voyager even, they seem to be about that mostly. Like, we're more concerned with the questions than we are with giving you the answers we think are right. Now, TNG did that more, I think, than the other series, where they were offering...
TOS gave a lot more just hard answers on that, but...
Okay, I'm in retrospect, I'm thinking of TOS as being more philosophical explorations than just giving straight hard answers, but it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I'm probably forgetting a lot. But yeah, and they weren't as concerned with giving us the answers that the writers think. And that becomes much more transparent with Discovery, definitely. And another thing is, that I think more conservative viewers and people who really like Star Trek have a problem with is, especially with Discovery, is that you have this cast of people, this cast of characters, these people that were in Starfleet and
don't get me started on the characters
that are on this ship who are children.
Yeah,
they aren't competent enough to do this work. They aren't stable enough to do this work.
No.
things would not go well for this crew if they were actually put in these situations.
At least once an episode, someone in the main cast is crying. At least once an episode.
Mm-hmm.
Over an emotional breakdown. Or something that hits them so hard. It's like, I'm not opposed to Starfleet officers showing emotion.
Yeah. Or even crying.
Or even crying, but...
when you see them do that in previous series, they're crying, but they're doing their job.
They're doing their job, and by God, it's earned.
Yeah.
And
tears are cheap in Discovery.
Yeah. The best comparison, any episode of Star Trek Discovery, when the tears are flowing freely, it's like every episode of season 3 that I watched, I gave up after 4 episodes. Because it started off, okay, hey, this is somewhere new. This is a new aspect of this world to explore. This is a new situation for a ship to be in. All right, cool. Every episode, Burnham was crying. That character was crying her eyes out about something.
Mm-hmm.
Compare that to Kirk at the end of Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
He shows immense emotion, but keeps it under control, because he's the man in charge, and everyone knows it.
Yeah, when you're outperformed by William Shatner.
Right.
And that's almost not fair, because I do think the actress, I don't know her name, but the actress that plays Michael Burnham is actually a good actress. I think she does. I mean, I think the directing...
I mean, if she can cry on command like that...
And the writing is really what suffers with Discovery, but I do think she's a very good
Martin
actress.
Green.
Yeah. I think she's the actress that plays Whitney Houston in the new biopic, but I could be wrong. I think it's her, though.
I don't know.
But, yeah, I don't want to lay really any fault at the feet of the actors, because the number of them are actually do a really good job with what they're given.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, the writing is not good.
And Doug Jones is always just a joy to see.
Yeah.
He's so weird-looking all the time, because he's a weird-looking dude.
Gangly.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen a person in my life that fit that description as well as Doug Jones.
I listened to an interview with Doug Jones on another podcast called Imaginary Worlds. And that was a fascinating interview. He seems like just the coolest dude.
He would have to be to go through the time commitment of the makeup that he goes through, like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
Apparently his favorite character to ever play was the guy from, or the fish man in The Shape of Water.
Yeah.
It made that outfit made his ass look just amazing.
Jim Carrey, when he was playing the Grinch, he likened the makeup time to being tortured, and they actually had to bring in a
rack?
No, they actually had to bring in a someone who was trained to teach people how to withstand torture to help Jim Carrey deal with that situation.
Wow.
Yeah. So they'd have to take breaks occasionally so that Jim could just kind of allow himself to freak the fuck out. And there were other times when he he would take the advice of the person, and he'd be like sitting there in this like almost full Grinch getup, just chain smoking cigarettes and talking to as many people as he could while the makeup was going on, because distractions are useful. Yeah. I
want to see video of the Grinch smoking.
The chain smoking Jim Carrey Grinch.
Yes. But getting back to New Trek, from a creative standpoint, I do not know why they didn't set that post Voyager. There's no reason not to.
The tech would have made a lot more sense. The things that they discovered.
And you wouldn't have had to plagiarize an Egyptian indie game.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh yeah, that was settled out of court.
Oh, is this the tardigrade, space tardigrade thing?
Yes, the game was called Tardigrades. Yeah, look up the similarities between tardigrades and season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. And oh boy, they basically ripped the entire premise of tardigrades
problems
to put in Star Trek Discovery.
Awesome.
Yeah. Right down to the look of Stamets.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the chief engineer of the ship from Tardigrades is a dead ringer for the chief engineer of the ship in tardigrades, complete with infusing himself with tardigrade DNA to pilot the ship.
Problems.
Yes, and the mycelial network, stolen from tardigrades. It's... Someone's head should have rolled over that one.
Well, you know, you got enough money to settle out of court.
Yeah. There was no reason Discovery had to be as bad as it was.
Well, they probably thought, this is some indie game from Egypt. Who the hell's going to know?
The guy from Egypt.
The guy from Egypt.
Who was probably watching Star Trek.
Right. Like, you thought about half of this, which is nobody knows that story, but you didn't think about the other half, which is it's a Star Trek show and people all over the world are going to watch it.
Right. So there's no reason Discovery had to be as bad as it was. I mean, true. Season 1 of every Star Trek show is a bit rough.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. But you did not give us anything about the rest of the crew.
Yeah, the whole time I was watching the first season of Star Trek Discovery, or STD as it is to be called, I just wanted to know about the cyborg lady. I never got that answer before I gave up, but I wanted to know what's with that lady on the bridge.
Yeah, I can't even remember her name. I think her first name's Kayla.
Probably, I don't know. I know from somebody that her fate's not great, but that was the character I just wanted to know more about because she looked interesting, and I never got any answers on that.
Yeah.
Other than that, Soru was my guy, and I didn't really give a shit about
the only time that you find out about any of the rest of the crew is right before they're killed. the full cyborg lady, not the half cyborg lady.
Yeah. See, the half cyborg lady, I wanted to know more about her.
Yeah. The full cyborg lady, they have an entire episode about a day in her life, and in the next episode, she's dead.
Oh.
It's to give you an emotional attachment that you didn't have before, and then immediately cash in on it.
Crash course.
Yes.
Yeah, the only two things I really liked about Discovery were Soru and Michael Burnham's haircuts.
Yeah, Soru was cool. Michael Burnham's haircuts were acceptable.
They were different, like every season. I kind of liked it.
Yeah, she grew it out in season 3. The Red Angel storyline from season 2 was god awful.
Plus, they did what you always do when you're suffering. Spock. Enter Spock.
Yeah, enter Spock and Pike, and oh, hey, look, it's the Enterprise. Remember the Enterprise? They just throw so many member berries at you.
Mm-hmm.
Picard did a lot of the same thing. There's no reason Picard shouldn't have centered on Picard.
Yeah.
But the character that actually had an arc was Soji. It should have been called Star Trek Soji.
Mm-hmm. That just happened to feature those other characters.
Picard was there. He had no arc.
Yeah.
He didn't change at all, other than just running around and apologizing for everything he ever did. No one had an arc in that show, outside of Soji.
Yeah, that's a problem when you have a show that's going into season 3 now.
When it's serialized.
Yeah.
It's you can look at like episodic Star Trek, TNG, DS9, and Voyager. Although DS9 and Voyager started to experiment with serialized episodes, but those characters had more of an arc than these series that have serialized seasons.
Yeah.
And they still managed to keep bringing Brent Spiner back. Like, Data is dead. Season 2, Brent Spiner's back as Noonien Soong's grandfather.
Well, yeah, they use the Dragon Balls, man.
I guess. And now it's like they go to an alternate universe, but it's not the mirror universe, where Brent Spiner, or Noonien Soong, Brent Spiner's character is, like, remembered as the great savior of Earth, who's now the center of an empire. It's like, how is this not the mirror universe? It's not the mirror universe, though. So they got to go back to 2019 or 2021.
Of course they do.
Yeah, to fix the timeline, because it's like, okay, a time travel episode every once in a while, that can be fun. An entire season of time travel, and then this fixation on Picard's mom and how she hanged herself.
That wasn't even in TNG, I don't
know.
No,
never brought up.
You'd think that would be something they would have talked about.
And how it was so traumatic his entire life. But
yeah, especially with oh, good God, really? Whoopi Goldberg.
Guinan,
thank you.
Oh, Guinan's back.
Oh, yeah, I knew about that. But yeah, you
played by a different actress.
Really?
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg was signed on to play Guinan again.
Yeah, for like an episode.
Oh, and then she came back as a different actress?
When they went back in time.
Okay.
But that doesn't make a damn lick of sense.
Anyway.
Because, Guinan looked the same in the 2300s as she did in the 19th century when she was in San Francisco.
Yeah. And, back then she was dealing with talking to some stranger over the net, and it was a big thing over some Rolling Stones
lyrics. That's how she met her husband.
Yes, it is. That's how she met her husband. I remember Jumpin' Jack Flash. And then she joined a nunnery. It was pretty wild times for Guinan.
And then Seven of Nine's character, or Jerry Ryan's character, Seven of Nine, the whole character is a member berry. In all seasons, she's just a member berry.
Gene Memberberries?
What?
Gene Memberberries.
Oh, yes. I see what you did there. It's a Class 6 planet. There should at least be Roddenberries.
Yeah, and I guess what we're really boiling this down to is complaints about the
contrivance.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I was talking to somebody the other day. I can't remember who it was. I was talking about how it seems like the state of storytelling and media right now is you have people who are coming into these positions, these writing positions, and we're starting to get people who grew up in a generation that didn't spend as much time talking directly to other people and maybe being socialized out in the wild, for lack of better words, right? With other kids in neighborhoods and things like that. And I think the problem we're running into is that now we've got a generation of people who, when they write things, it feels like they understand humanity and the human experience and all that by proxy.
Yeah, in abstract only.
They're writing things that feel like copies of copies. And it's because to me, it seems like they've learned how to write two ways. Well, they're all only doing it in one way, but from two things. One, they view people, like human behavior, in terms of how characters in TV shows and movies behave that they've seen growing up. So we're starting to get, the copy of a copy, clone retard version of we're going to pay for that, of writing.
It's an incestuous relationship that results in retard babies.
She'd be your sister, which means you'd have extra retard babies. That's 3. What's our quota?
Do we have a retard quota?
We need to stop. Anyway,
I don't know if I can. I might be retarded.
We're going to get canceled. Anyway.
Somehow we're still on air in Germany. I don't get it.
But, so yeah, that's the one way. They're getting it by proxy from watching TV shows and movies instead of actually really experiencing these things. And then...
I wonder how many of them went to college.
That's my next point here.
Okay.
Is that the other half of their learning experience as far as writing is entirely academic. So we're getting writers who are too concerned with the academic structure of writing. And so we can see all of the old contrivances of writing, the formulas, everything seems like it's just moving from beat to device to beat to device, from beat to device, so on and so forth. You got your narrative devices, you know where the character needs to go from here to here, and you insert some kind of narrative device to get them there. And that's
irrespective of character.
Right. And it's resulting in things that, like you said, feel contrived because they are contrived. We're not having writers that...
I didn't say they feel contrived. I said they were contrived.
Well, yeah. We're getting that experience of watching these shows where it's like, we is this a person or is this a character? It's so transparent that we're watching a show that's being written by writers who are working from some academic structure of the story that they're trying to tell. And the characters aren't that believable, and it tends to be overacted, it tends to be melodramatic. Now, on the flip side of that, it's almost like we have a divergence in writing, where a lot of it seems to be what I just described, but then we also have standout shows that has made television better than it's ever been. You know, I mean, I'm thinking about even things like Andor. Like, Andor is a really, really good show with sensible writing and great character development. Like, in some sense, I think there's Oscar-worthy writing in something like Andor.
I'm sure I can find some fuck-ups there somewhere.
Probably. But
from what I understand, the show has a fairly large cast, which means some of those characters are not going to be very well developed.
You'd be surprised, man. They do a really, really good job with it. But yeah, and then, you know, we've got shows like God, what are some other examples? Arcane, as far as animation goes.
I was wondering when you're going to bring up Arcane.
Arcane's a great example of that, where you've got animated storytelling that it has really good character development.
And what I love about Arcane, and we've probably talked about this before, but what I really love about Arcane is there is such political messaging in it, but it's not so much, hi, I'm an opinion that embodies a character. No, you have characters that have opinions.
Yeah.
And the show is written in such a way that anyone could be wrong here.
Yeah.
And everyone, in some degree, is wrong.
And you've got people in all of these camps that are reasonable and mean and sympathetic, and who are also sons of bitches.
Yeah, even the villain of the show, at some level, he's sympathetic.
Yeah.
You get where he's coming from. You might not approve of how ruthlessly he pursues it.
Yeah, but you understand him.
Yeah. And
at times you even, maybe even to your chagrin, feel for him.
Yeah, and it's like he's not an absolute monster.
No. No, he is an ends
justifying orphans.
Right. He is an ends justifies the means sort of character. But you see what he's gone through, and you see what he thinks he's after. And it's like, look, I actually think what you're after might work, but your methods for getting there are really bad.
Delegitimizes your entire...
Yeah. It's not going to result in the goal that you seem to be seeking.
Yeah, Arcane is great for that. I can't wait till season 2 comes out.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. I've sung the praises of that show ever since I saw it. But yeah, so you do have that divergence because you haven't had television, Western television at the very least, up to this point, didn't have very many examples of that kind of really strong actual storytelling that you didn't really get in anything other than books for a long time, and films.
Or adaptations of books.
Right.
Although, then again... My favorite show that's been on in the past several years was The Expanse, and I've talked about that quite a bit.
I've heard a lot of good things. I just haven't started watching it.
It's a slow burn. It takes them a while to get all the pieces in place before things can really start moving.
Yeah.
But this is how you do hard sci-fi. So let me, real quick, between hard and soft sci-fi. Star Wars is not sci-fi.
Space opera.
Yes, that is a type of sci-fi. Star Wars is science fantasy. Nothing They never attempt to even explain how any of this works, but it is obviously technological.
And the one time they did, people were pissed.
Right, like the fuel.
The midichlorians. That's what I'm thinking
okay.
of. Yeah.
I was thinking the hyperfuel.
Right.
That didn't need to happen. They didn't need to do that. Why did you do that? The Star Trek is soft sci-fi, where the laws of physics and how the technology interacts with the world and the people is this works, and we'll throw some techno babble at you.
We bounce the photon particle beam off the main reflector dish.
That's the way we do it, son. We're making shit up as we wish. Klingons and the Romulans, they pose no threat to us.
Because if we find a word to bind, we'll just make some shit up.
Yeah. That's soft sci-fi.
Yeah.
Most sci-fi you've ever seen
soft sci-fi.
Is soft sci-fi. And to an extent, all sci-fi has soft elements to it.
Well, yeah, because if they didn't, then we would have that technology.
Or it'd be a scientific paper.
Right.
Like theoretical physics.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, some of that has some soft elements. But The Expanse is the hardest sci-fi TV show ever made. In my opinion.
PhD in squishy science.
So they came to me and asked, do you have a degree in theoretical physics? And I told them, I have a theoretical degree in physics, and they told me you're hired. And that's how I ended up here working at this power station.
God, what was that? Was that Biodome?
No.
What was that?
No, that was Fallout New Vegas.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I was way off.
Mr. Fantastic. Dude's an absolute idiot. He figured out how to turn on the lights and thought it was a great achievement. Anyway, The Expanse, the only soft tech that's in like that you initially see is the drives.
Mm.
And to a lesser extent the fusion drives or the fusion reactors. We have no idea how to build an Epstein drive. It's just when asked, hey, how does this work? It works on efficiency. It's a drive that can maintain high G acceleration for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get from Earth to Neptune in a matter of days. That's the only soft element to it. As far as how the universe works. Everything else is, we've built railguns, we know those work. Light lag is a thing. You can't have real-time communications across the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of ignoring those laws of physics to try and speed things up, no, they confine themselves in that box to actually make more drama.
Mm-hmm.
And because of how the universe is set up, it's like, my God, this isn't a contrivance. This is the fucking laws of physics we're running into.
Mm-hmm.
We can't get past this. And as the show goes on, more soft elements do appear, but it's Clark Tech, which Clark Tech is any sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the fucking Expanse? All right, the show's over for now. They said they might bring it back to finish the last 3 books.
And now on to our sponsors. Watch
Jack
The Expanse.
Daniels.
Watch The Expanse.
With Jack Daniels.
Are you watching?
None of these things sponsor us.
No, they don't.
Could we get a Jack Daniels sponsorship? You think they'd pay us?
Not much, if they did. Because, I mean, our viewership is piddling.
Would they pay us enough to get another bottle of Jack Daniels?
They probably would do that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, $30 for a couple of mentions of Jack Daniels, why not?
Yeah,
So what else can we talk about as far as entertainment media? Trying to think if there's any little things we just haven't quite touched on yet that might be interesting to talk about.
It's been 2.5 hours, Dave.
It's been.
You must be punished.
No. Oh, baby's sleeping. Babies. There's babies asleep.
Yeah, that's... All right. I think we're going to call this episode of the State of the World brought to you by the Arbitrarium.
All right. I might come up with a better title. But,
you should.
Because
really
this is going to be a series, I think, of just true Arbitrarium ramblings.
Yes.
Topic to topic, bounce to bounce, that kind of shit. So, all right. Are you going to play us out on that godforsaken instrument?
Yes.